Today's subject is ugly and urgent. Threats, slurs, genocide jokes, and 29 pages of leaked Telegram messages from young Republican leaders across America. This isn't rumor or clickbait, people. Politico reviewed thousands of verified messages showing people who call themselves the future of the GOP trading racist slurs, rape jokes, and praise for Hitler. It's shocking, it's disgusting, and if you believe in decency, no matter your political affiliation, it's something you need to know about. If you want to see the documents, timelines, and insider analysis we're referencing today, there will be links on our newsletter coming out. That's where we post the real data, not just the headlines. I'm Joe, this is MiddleGround Mic, and today we're going to break down what's in the leak, how leaders on both sides are responding, and why 99% of Republicans I've talked to are furious about it, and what this moment says about American politics and redemption and extremism in our country. Let's set the stage early. This leak, I think, like I said, 2,900 pages long, comes from a series of Telegram chat logs involving young Republican leaders from New York, Kansas, Vermont, and Arizona. The messages span from January through August of 2025, meaning some of these people seem like they probably felt emboldened once President Trump was in office. And I'm not calling President Trump a racist. I'm just saying some people took advantage of the situation, which is pretty obvious. The participants, they weren't nobodies. They weren't some backdoor people you've never heard of. No, they were state chapter chairs. They were vice chairs. They were legislative staffers. And one of them, Vermont Sam Douglas, is a sitting state senator. He should be ashamed. And if these things are true, he supposedly said, he should resign. If you're not familiar, the Young Republican National Federation, it's one of the oldest, if not the oldest, GOP youth organization in the country. It's a 527 group, meaning it's directly tied to campaign fundraising and political development. These people are, and these young people, kids essentially they're supposed to be the future of conservative leadership. And now we're going to have a serious gap. That's not okay. It's not okay what they said. So this isn't just locker room talk or edgy memes. It's people who are trusted with the next generation of political leadership for this party. The party that is supposed to have been the party of the working class going forward. Well, newsflash, the working class incorporates people from all walks of life. And so does the MAGA movement, and so does the conservative. It's casually talking about gas chambers, stereotypes, sexual violence. How disgusting. Just disgusting. Terrible. And anybody who even tries to downplay this or excuse this, get out of here. Ask yourself, if that's what the future looks like, what happens when they're the present? That's scary. I mean, that's no different than when people on the right are talking about people on the left saying racial things. It's no different. This is terrible. How do these people talk about constituents who don't look like them when the cameras are off? How do you do that? First, hot mics. Hello. Second, terrible. I mean, literally, what's in your heart? Because obviously it is not unity that's in some of these young folks' hearts. And why did it take a leak for this culture to be exposed? That's what we really need to know. People who knew about this in the young conservative movement, they should come forward or they should talk about it. There needs to be a whistleblower. Who's saying that this is okay? Because I highly doubt that nobody really knew, right? Somebody knew, somebody covered it up. Or it's like and it would have to be the greatest cover up job in history. Not literally, figuratively speaking. Political's timeline shows that earlier in the year, they're saying that the chats were relatively normal, political gossip, campaign talks, snipping at opponents. But by March and April, things got dark. Jokes about race and religion started popping up. By May, it wasn't jokes. It was about ideology. Here's some examples, right? New York's Peter wrote, "Everyone that votes no is going in the gas chamber." Another participant, Joe Malagino, responded, "Can we fix the showers? Gas chambers don't fit the Hitler aesthetic." That's not edgy humor. That's open admiration for genocide. And this show has spoken out about genocide significantly, especially, look what's happening in Gaza. This is not something we should be laughing about. In Kansas, William Hendricks, the vice chair of the Young Republicans, reportedly used the N-word and posted racial tropes about fried chicken, watermelon, and Kool-Aid. What are you thinking? Who raised you? Alex Dwyer, the state chair, dropped a white supremacist code 1488, combining the 14 words and Hail Hitler. What? And Vermont Senator Sam Douglas and his wife were in the chat making anti-Semitic and racist remarks. In one message, his wife allegedly wrote, "You're giving nationals too much credit and expecting the Jew to be honest." And in New York, Bobby Walker made the graphic jokes about raping women's bodies. I'm pretty sure if Bobby Walker had a daughter or somebody like that that went through that, don't think he'd be joking. This is dehumanization. It's violence as humor. It's historical glorification of gas chambers and Hitler's and praising Hitler. Silence as complicity, right? Dozens of people laughed, joined in, few, if any, objected. I mean, sometimes that can be because they're looking out for their own hide. Doesn't make it okay, but that happens in all situations. This was strategic hate, discussions about using slurs or propaganda to hurt rivals. That's not just gross, that's dangerous, people. Because when you start treating people as humans, it becomes easy to justify cruelty. Think of our Charlie Kirk situation, right? We talk about people on the left saying Hitler, 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 Hitler. Well, then you got things like this coming out, and now all that's going to happen is it's going to fuel more. It's going to fuel more because people are saying things like this behind the scenes. We have to be better. People in the conservative movement need to hold each other accountable and not okay or downplay this. If this is how you think, you have no place in it based on what a lot of our prominent people now say in this movement, right? What starts as a meme, at least in some situations there, it seems became a mindset of thinking what was funny when it was not. Do I know what was in these people's hearts? No, but I mean, it seems that they felt that this was okay. I don't think the vast majority of young Republicans are like this. I know a couple. I know most people in the party despise this, but we need the leaders in the party and in this movement to come out and do something about it and not just do ad lib to make people feel better. No party, left or right, is immune to moral rot if the people at the stop if the people at the top stop calling it out. Fairness, right? Now, to stay fair, some of those names say parts of the logs were doctored or taken out of context. Peters said he was being extorted. Others claimed they were trolling to shock people. Well, if you're trolling to shock people, you've got a terrible sense of humor and you think really backwards. You should not do that, and you do not deserve to be a part of that movement if that is your thinking. But Politico says it reviewed the entire threads, not snippets. And when you have multiple state chapters with consistent tone, timestamps, and cross participants, that's not a deep fake. That's a culture, possibly. I don't know if it's the whole movement, right? Because it seems to have been isolated with certain states, right? So I would hope that it's not across the country. So, I'll say alleged, verified according to Politico, because truth requires discipline, but discipline doesn't mean silence, right? These are allegations. Not everything has completely come out. There's a lot that has come out. So, but a lot of this is pretty concrete, right? You can't really hide behind it. And if you're innocent, don't hide behind it was just a joke. You show receipts. Produce the unedited chat, not a statement from your lawyer. Take it to them. If it's not accurate, if these people are lying about you, take it to them, man. Take it to because I guarantee you produce goes to every single network, have your lawyer to go to every network, put it out there. Put it out there for everybody to download. And this will go away real quick on that individual person that did not do it. So, I challenge you to make that happen, because that's just, to me, that's just common sense. This is just, it's crazy to me, I'm just so disappointed, I guess, a lot of our leaders and at the top for the GOP, they need to come out and say something about this. They need to do something about this. They need to look into somehow can you structurally reform the young conservatives? How can we create more accountability within the movement? Like that needs to be a top priority. Like, how do we do that, right? And then that state sitting senator, if they're really saying something like that, boom, you need to go. Sorry. It should their resignation should already be in right now. If that's true, boom, you should be gone. You should have the decency to resign. Because if not, all you're doing is perpetrating the same thing. And it's terrible. You know, um, I would really hope somebody wouldn't try to extort someone over like this, but people are shisty. People are kind of gross. You know, who's talking? Who's silent? Who's out? Within 48 hours of the leak, hearings have started rolling in. Peter Granetta was fired from his position as chief of staff in the New York Assembly, deservedly so. Joel Milingo was removed from the state court system. William Hendricks has lost his communications role in Kansas Attorney General Chris Kobach's office. The Kansas Young Republicans chapter has now been deactivated and the entire board has been dismissed. The condemnations have come fast from the vast majority, from people like that. It is just so hard to wrap my head around this. I mean, it's, obviously, Democrats naturally, anybody really has come out and spoke out about it. Chuck Schumer's called the behavior revolting, and he had some other choice words. Governor Kathy Hochul said it was vile and abhorrent. She's not wrong. It is vile. It's no vile than the people who said bad things about Charlie Kirk. It is, obviously, a little bit, obviously not as bad as saying something about someone's death, but it's right there, and it encourages people to commit violence because all you're doing is putting it in people's heads, right? You got to stop doing that. Hakeem Jeffries called the participants sick people. They are sick people. Funny or not, joking or not, this is a political movement. You don't say things like that. That's just terrible. Kansas GOP chair Dondre Herbert, a black Republican, shut down the Kansas Young Republicans chapter immediately. Kudos for doing that. You did the right thing. Can you rebuild it into a new chapter, whether it's young or punk? Can you rebuild something new in delivering on the promise that it was supposed to? Vermont GOP leaders called for resignations. The Young Republican National Federation itself has officially condemned the actions that demanded those involved step down. I would walk up to them and say, step down or you're gone. Like, it shouldn't even be something that we have to do a press release on before it happens. It should already have happened. For a moment, this has been bipartisan moral clarity, the kind of a clarity America hasn't seen in a while. A lot of people on both sides are coming and doing this, especially, I should say, speaking out against this, right? I know a lot of Republicans. I know a lot, and I have never heard any of them on a personal level, even outside. And when we make jokes, none of them ever said things of this, not like this, ever. And most of them, I can't think of very many that would be okay with this. It's, this is a rare moment when it seems like the leaders on the right and left agree. This is wrong, period. No caveats, no excuses. There's no excuses for what these young men did, and women, I'm guessing. For as far as I know, it's just young men, but there's no excuse for it. None at all. And any politician who tries to downplay this, shame on you. And if you're downplaying this and you seem to try to excuse it, you deserve to lose your reelection bid. I don't care what party you are. I'll say it. And then JD Vance's reaction. He said on X, I refuse to join the pearl clutching when power people call for political violence. He compared this leak to a separate Democrat texting scandal in Virginia involving Jay Jones, basically saying this isn't worse than what they did. It's textbook deflection, right? What they did is bad. Nobody's excusing that, but you should be coming out and saying this is not acceptable. In a situation like this, who cares what another incident was? We're talking about this. It needs to be condemned. If we want everybody to do it, our leaders at the top need to go in that same direction, right? So we need to hold everyone accountable. But moral leadership means condemning your own side first. Whether you're Republican or Democrat, you must always condemn your own side first, not pointing across the aisle to score points. Stop with the political point scoring. It is so backwards. Why are we worried about scoring political points in this situation? Calling this pearl clutching trivializes hate. This isn't pearl clutching. This is wrong. And we had some people that are in the government that were saying this in a state. This isn't pearl clutching. It happened. It happened. JD Vance, he pooped the bed on a major leadership opportunity that could have really solidified what MAGA has always wanted to stand for. He could have said both are wrong. We have to fix our own house and demand better from everyone. Stop making things one-sided. If it's not okay, it's not okay. It doesn't matter who does it. Some people are saying he told people to not care. I didn't get that from it. I felt like it was a little bit of downplaying, but you can take that how you want. He shouldn't be condemning racism and then sticking an asterisk on it because somebody on the opposite side did something. What kind of message does that send? All that does is enable somebody on the opposite side to do the same thing, but in reverse. It's not okay. From knowing a lot of Republicans personally, right? I know a lot of people in the movement, in the party, I should say. I want to make something clear because I've talked to some Republican insiders, some people that, former campaign staffers and, party people over this. they're livid, they're embarrassed, they're disgusted. A whole part of the MAGA movement was bringing everybody in, regardless of race. Charlie Kirk even said that regardless of race, you have a place in the MAGA movement. And these young people are trashing that message. Charlie Kirk would be appalled at what these young men did. They would be appalled, or he would be appalled because he wanted to bring everybody in the fold for peaceful debate. I have yet to see any kind of text messages come out about Charlie Kirk that would ever insinuate. And don't start with the whole, oh, he said this and this about, women. Watch the whole episode. Stop watching those 20-second clips because even if you disagree with it, there's a whole lot more context to it so you can get what he's trying to, it doesn't represent, Republican faith, Republican values, or their movement of where they're trying to take this country. They're trying to unify the working class. These young people that did this, that divides them. That hurts everybody. The vast majority of Republicans, 99% of them are not okay with any of this, especially when it comes to their faith, right? That is not a Christian response or Christian thing to do. They've told me, hey, we stand for small government, not small minds, right? This isn't conservatism. This is cowardice. This is vile. And these are terrible things to say. And it makes you question what can be in some people's hearts. Some kids these days think things like that. Things like, hey, make them edgy. It actually makes them irrelevant and ignorant. And I would hope no matter what side you're on, any kind, no matter what race it refers to, you would not be okay with this. And they're right. Real Republicans, the ones who volunteer at the food banks, the ones who go to church, who raise families, and who work hard, want nothing to do with this kind of darkness, this kind of soul-pitting responses that tear at the very soul of who we are. Nobody wants anything to do with that. This type of thinking just doesn't go against the GOP. It goes against common decency, and no matter who you are, like it's terrible. People are, out there saying we're done protecting these people. Well, first, you should have never protected something like that in the first place. And the fact that you're saying you did, if some of them have said it, you need to go. They can start their own hate club, but people don't want an R next to it. And this isn't just about the right supposedly being evil. It's about evil hiding inside of the right and the good people rejecting it. It happens on the left too. But inside the right movement, right? I'm a very middle of the road, but I lean conservative. But we need to reject it vividly. And what can we do, whether you're left or right, to prevent things like this from happening, right? We're never going to be able to completely prevent it. You're never going to be able to say 1000% what's in someone's heart, but we have to do everything we can to prevent it. We have to put safeguards in there. We have to teach the people, young people coming up, that this is not acceptable under any circumstance. That's what America needs to see. People within the GOP standing up and not stepping back, not cowering down. Even if you don't agree with what the vice president says, don't let that silence you. Speak up. A lot of the most have. I have not really. I just didn't like that JDP kind of tried to swash it to the side, right? And try to go, well, they did it too. Well, that's nice. They did it too. But we're supposed to be the party that prevents this, right? We're supposed to be the party that ends this. Look at what Charlie Kirk did. Charlie Kirk challenged these very notions. And they can't say that he didn't. All you got to do is pull up anything he's ever done, and it's right there. He challenged racial notions all the time, gender notions all the time. He hated hate, so how did we get here? It's easy to a point, right? It's a lack of oversight. That means who was watching what was going on, who was guiding these young people. How did they get to this point to where they think that's okay? We need to systematically fix that within the young Republicans, or at home, especially if they're learning this at home. And people confusing free speech with freedom from consequences. We talked a lot about that, about people on the left, with the Jimmy Kimmel thing and, people getting fired and things of that nature for the Charlie Kirk situation, right? Well, it just doesn't apply to the left. It's the same thing on the right. It's these things just they're not okay, right? And how do we teach our people, our young people, whether it's conservatives or liberals, how do we teach them that certain things like this are just not okay? How do we change that mindset, right? Because, people on the left were laughing and celebrating and cheering Charlie Kirk's murder. How do we, and then you got some of these young conservatives out there in this movement that were, joking about genocide and racism. And how do we get our young people to think that this is not okay? Where do we start at, right? This starts in the home. This starts with the people who influence them in their lives. We need them to stop it. because they're the guiding light for these young people. There's always someone who leads them. Or is it the blind leading the blind? But it's got to start at home. These values, these no-go, these we will not go there zones need to start at home. And these chats didn't form overnight. They grew in silence because no one wanted to be the killjoy who said that's not funny and then get ostracized for it. This goes back to, people can say, oh, well, there's whistleblower laws, anti-retaliation laws. Let get real, people. A lot of people who speak up get ostracized and they get kicked out of whatever it is, whether it's work or whatever. Let's be real. But that's how radicalization works. It's a slow erosion of shame. These people should be shamed. I don't know, I'm not an expert on the law, but if there's, legal consequences here, I'm sure someone will find a way to make them face it. We've seen this before, right? In the Rossello telegram leaks in Puerto Rico, in the college political scandals on both sides, people, and online radical groups on both sides. It starts with jokes and then ends with justification. Look at the Charlie Kirk murder. That's a case in point, right? Look at the state murder or the state representative murder in Minnesota. Even though from my understanding that was from someone from her own party mad that she kind of like jumped ship to a little bit to help get something passed. The bigger issue isn't whether these specific people lose jobs. It's whether can we get this culture replaced with accountability and ethics training in every political youth group, and heck, to be honest, every political group that goes all the way to old people. No offense. Democrat or Republican, right? I mean, to me, these things are like 101 that we should be teaching our children at home and our young people as they go through life. Because if they did this at a job, they would be out of a job. You want reform? Here's what some basic reform will look like. Independent audits of youth political organizations, mandatory ethics certification for leadership, and it needs to be more than just you being able to recite a book. I despise that. When we're talking about these certification things, it's how do we put it in play? How do we make it happen? What's the guidelines? What's the framework we give these kids to make sure these things aren't happening? It's easy to say, read a book and be like, this is bad. This is a no-no. Well, that's the easy part, people. It's easy to do that. What it, where the problem with a lot of training for a lot of these things come in is and I'm not talking about role playing, right? How do we get it implemented? How do we make this happen? How do we make it consistent? That's something we talk about in business, right? A lot is consistency. We have to be consistent with things like this. It's not okay no matter who it is. Public facing codes of conduct, right? With enforcement. Bans on anyone caught spreading hate from holding office for a set term. I mean, if you're spreading hate and saying things about us, I don't know if that's going that far because that's up to the people, but yeah, I don't know. I know some people are out there saying that, but it's, I would be against ever voting for someone like that. I would never vote for someone like that, but man, that's a testy one. I believe that one should be up to the voters. I would not, I would vote for them not to be able to, but I am not the end all be all authority on that one. And above all, like I've been talking about, right? Mentorship. Who's talking to these people? Who's coaching these young kids? Older conservatives really need to teach the younger ones that the power without empathy is a dead end, and you will lose everything you've worked for. You will lose it because people will abandon you. Nobody, especially a minority group's not going to stick around if you're doing things like this. Why would they? I sure as hell wouldn't, and this is about moral clarity, right? And how do we move forward? This, for me, this isn't about left versus right. This is where the middle comes in, right? Because we should all be able to meet on the middle on an issue like this and do something about it. Stop making it about party politics. That's how we can solve this. If you truly believe in the conservative values in the platform, right? Faith, family, freedom, personal responsibility, you should be the first to condemn this hate, not the last. The United States, our America, doesn't need to engage in pushing more outrage and not fixing the problem. The courage that it takes, and it takes a lot of courage to look people that are on your side in the eye and say, that's not who we are. And that's what our top leadership in this country needs to do, especially if you're conservative. And to the Democrats listening, hold your side to the same standard, because there's some people over there that spew things to a different degree, right? It's easy to go out there and find it, just like it is easier for people on the right. But, use this to lead and say, we're all better than this. Can the GOP use this moment to purge extremism and rebuild credibility ahead of the 2026 elections? If the GOP had half a mind, it would. Can Democrats avoid turning this into performative outrage instead of model accountability? Because if both sides only weaponize this scandal, nothing will change. We'll be right back here in another month, couple months, whatever, when the next scandal drops. This will all be whatever the election's going to be about. It won't be about the issues like people talking about the government shutdown and the subsidies, right? Where all they're doing is passing the cost from your pay coming out of your coming out of your paycheck and taxes. And then they're lying to you saying they're actually doing something for you rather than fixing the problem that they claim to on the campaign trails and actually going after cost. Go after cost, but sorry, that'll be a whole nother thing. But the story of the Young Republicans League isn't about one chat. It's about character. I'm not trying to assassinate these people's character because I don't know them personally. These are all allegations until there's a lot of facts out there that prove some of it, but again, I don't know these men and women on a level. I don't, so I'm just putting out there what has been published. But this is what happens when ambition outruns morality in young people and it's not checked. But I am encouraged though, because most Republicans I talk to are furious or not defensive. They want this cleaned up. And that's the America I know. If you want full sources linked to Politico's report, the Kansas Reflector documents, and my breakdown of every verified quote, go to check out the middlegroundmic.com newsletter that's going to be sent out later today. Sign up if you want it, or it'll be sent out again later this week. The next episode that we're going to look at how both parties' youth wings, from college Democrats to college Republicans, can create guardrails to prevent this in the future. I'm Joe. This is Middle Ground Mike. No left, no right, forward.